All right, guys, this is Howler Mouse. I am coming to you from our kitchen. The fiance has been doing some night shifts, and I didn't want to do it in the regular spot because I don't want to wake her. And I had done this yesterday, but I ended up taking one of my prescription sleeping pills I've had for a few years Friday night. And I actually cut the little thing and, the little pill in half. And ended up sleeping something like 10 and a half hours Saturday and couldn't shake the thing off. So I woke up, wouldn't say bright and bushy tailed, but I look better than I did yesterday. So just before we get into it, we have people catch in here for this live stream to talk about Watchmen stuff. Hey, Rob, what's going on? John Jones is here. Cayman X is here. What's up, guys? But the broadcasting, doing YouTube for the comic book room has been put to a halt because of two reasons. I can't find bookshelves. I've got all the boxes against the wall, two shelves built up. But if you can see this teeny tiny little light bulb, they have an oversized ceiling fan, and it's two light bulbs to light up the whole room. So unless I keep a window open constantly until I fix this or figure out something else, it's going to be haphazard around the house. Now, one of the things that I've been doing over the last months, and I've said it many times, is I've stayed offline a whole lot, right? A lot. I'm out of the loop on a lot of things. And one of the things that surprised me was the hate and the absolute, failing ratings of the Watchmen television show. Now, over the last, couple years and stuff, if you go way back on YouTube, I've got a playlist of a bunch of YouTubers where we all took a chapter of the Watchmen comic. I'm not going to dig them out. I've got a mint set of the Watchmen maxi series, 6 issues never read. And then I have a ton of stuff on them. And this is the actual trade that I got in 1988. I'm one of those guys that have studied Watchmen. I know I've read it over 100 times, and I can go on and on. And the bloom has been off the rose with the Watchmen being untouched, if you will. Almost one of those sacred staples of comic book history of this thing. We've had the movie, we had the Before Watchmen event back in, 2011 or 12. And we've had Doomsday Clock, which to me, everybody's put in their best effort. Jared Osborne and I agreed on this. He's got a YouTube channel. But on one of my comments on one of my threads or something on Facebook or Twitter or something, he put it perfectly. A lot of people put in their best effort, but it's flopped. The delays with scheduling, whatever's going on in the background, stuff I just don't care about anymore. And then the Watchmen HBO television show came on, right, on HBO. Tonight is the 4th episode. It is November 10th, 2019. But to me, it didn't feel like a Watchmen television show until the 3rd episode. And then a guy named Josh Terry, I don't know what his handle on YouTube used to be, kind of popped up there, and I put on Facebook how I was enjoying the show. The 3rd episode finally gelled and it came together. And he let me know that there was like a lot of bad press. Also, over the last couple of weeks, I've had a couple of videos sent to me about this hate that's coming out of Watchmen being overdone, overplayed, not that good, things like that. And I'm an adult. I've reached that point where I've stayed offline. I'm not politically charged after these last couple stressful years where it seems to be everywhere. And I can just sort of enjoy it for what it is. But I'm a little biased on Watchmen because where I'm an adult, I don't care if people like it or don't like it. They can get on here and talk about it. So it's not an attack, and it's not saying that anybody's wrong. But I think there's a hate and an irrational hate for things is what I get at. And my God, the way things have been the last couple of years, that's bled into this stuff. I've actually took some notes. I was actually thinking about just doing a video without doing the live stream here of talking about Watchmen and the television show and the things I've seen and just kind of talk about it. And this is one of those things where I'll just go live. And if there's 10 people interested in this the whole time that this live stream is left up on YouTube, then so be it. No big deal. We're going back to old Howler Mouse times where we kind of go deep and look at the big picture and things, right? So a lot of the hate that is coming for the Watchmen and stuff It can't really be backed up. And that's what bothers me. There's this thing where you can talk about the work and not like it and say why you like it. Then there's this thing where if you get angry when somebody brings up its merits and its history and its place in comic books and what it did to elevate it and the damage it did, and that just burns you up, then that's an irrational hate. There's something about it where you're just sick of it and I don't understand it. And I think it has to do with a hate of nostalgia, a hate of there's been no real comics, if you think about it, in the last, we'll say 10 years, if not longer, that gives this generation its book. You know what I mean? People in the 60s had the Fantastic Four. In the 70s, they had X-Men. In the 80s, we just had some great stuff. We had Watchmen, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. You had Mouse. I personally throw in martial law to a certain extent, like their bastard cousin, if you will. And that's the thing I just can't get in their heads to understand and stuff like that. So there's 3 ways to read a piece of work, and you can kind of mix the 3 ways in together, right? It's not set in stone. You take the work on its own. To me, The Watchmen holds up on that. The Watchmen is everything you can do in a comic that you can't do in any other medium, and it also requires multiple readings. It's one of the few books, probably since Sandman. The other work that I think of is Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which is actually one long story broke up in chapters with its, you can get them in trades and those are its chapters. But it's one of those works that you can actually read it and not understand everything that's in there and what's going on. It does take multiple readings to get the entire work. Now, again, if they don't like it based on the work, no big deal. I could care less. Like I said, it's not an attack on people. But there's also the thing where what's going on with the author and what's going on in the world at the time that this was written in, the history that's going around that is going on while the work it is. Because a lot of times sci-fi is some of the best stuff where they can take what's going on in the present, set it in the future, give it a whole world, alien world, or whatever you want to be, a whole futuristic world, and you can metaphorically, symbolically, whatever, talk about social issues in that setting, and people can digest it better. Watchmen to me is that you got to go back to that era. The 2 things that I think talk about this perfectly is a song by Nina from the early 80s, a German singer, called 99 Luftballons. And also, I'm going to go back to the 50s. I think it was 51 of Catcher in the Rye. Because to me, Catcher in the Rye, Holden Caulfield, and Rorschach are a lot alike. I've not seen the new Watchmen show, but to me, Watchmen is more of a book about comic books and feels like some of that will be lost making it to a TV show. It's Cayman X. And that's why I mentioned the bloom off the rose. Before they messed with the Watchmen and put out all this new material, and I think they made the ultimate cut movie of Watchmen, is that they made a movie as close as it can to the Watchmen. All that's been done, not a problem, right? So yeah, for this to be a TV show, they're doing I'm going to talk about the TV show just a little bit later here about what I think they've gotten right. I've stayed offline and haven't heard all the hate and stuff, but I think I know where it's coming from. Eric Breen, Lost. I see what you did there. Hey, yeah. So, Catcher in the Rye was this big book by Salinger that's heralded as like one of the great literary works of the 20th century. Read it when I was 16, reread it in my early 30s, and I didn't get it. Okay, I didn't get it the first time I read it, yet I thought about the story, the idea of Holden Caulfield coming in there, and the word I didn't have at the time is that it's an unreliable narrator. I could tell there's something wrong with the goose. Yeah, Kid Ragnarok. I love 99 Luftballons, and I'll get to that. This is all going to gel, I hold, right? So the thing about Catcher in the Rye is, as I got older, there's tons of stuff on this book online. I actually took a few notes because I was going by memory, and I haven't read the book since the early 2000s. But I still remember parts of the story. And if you go back and read Watchmen, the central character is Rorschach, no matter how you see it. He's the person in the first issue that we're walking around with, and we're discovering this real world with him, introducing the characters. You know what I mean? We're walking with him through the streets, and he's wandering around. And Holden Caulfield in Catcher the Rye did that for 2 days, just walked around. And the themes of both those characters were isolation, the hatred of phoniness. Rorschach is turned way up with that, and they're both disturbed. Holden, I think he was traumatized by the death of his brother. Rorschach was traumatized by his childhood, and he was re-traumatized when he killed the child molester, child killer in the 70s, and that's when Kovac really became Rorschach. So we have two origins there who could honestly be two different characters. So was Alan Moore influenced by that or not? I don't know. But the thing about it is that if you look at history, when that book came out, this is after World War II. I think the book came out in 1951. And it was one of the first times, it was probably the first time in American history that teenagers were actually, almost all of them were finally in school and high school. And this led up into the 60s and the beatnik stuff and things like that, because for the first time, kids had time to think. They didn't have to get dragged on out to work, out in the farm, whatever, to help the family. People who made comic books in the 20s and stuff like that started as teens, Kubert and Kirby and all of them, because they were poor, and they started working early. And all of a sudden, we got kids that have time to think. And that's what's dangerous, because I think that's also what's going on now. Going back in history, I've always said history repeats itself. Humans, we go through cycles where we repeat things, but you live in your own head and you start losing the big picture of what's going on in reality, And I think that's what's going on, is that there's a lot of people in their head. Rorschach lived in his head, the isolationism, where he was isolated and walking around. He was outside of everything, and he stunk, and he had poor hygiene, and he lived a very lonely life, and he was uncompromised in what he did. Holden Caulfield, to me, is a guy who had too much time on his hands to think. So those are big themes and things that we can all relate to, even though that these are characters and, the absolute, like I said, turned up to 10 and stuff to tell the story. But the thing that amazed me about Holden Caulfield is that I agreed with the scene that I got is where he went into a bar and he watched, I think it was he watched this piano player. And the piano player was playing a song and he was doing all the motions and he was putting on a show, but he knew it was disingenuous. The guy was just acting and it was phony. And that's what I'm getting at when it comes to people, a certain faction of people who hate the Watchmen. They're just parroting what they're saying. They're this generation of just thinking too much, and they're not living enough life to have any kind of bearing on what's going on. Now, so Holden Caulfield also had this dream of being the catcher in the rye, where he was in a field of rye, and all these kids were running towards him and past him, and he turned around and saw that all these kids were falling off a cliff they couldn't see when they came out of the rye, and he was trying to catch them all and save them and things. And that in itself can be talked about saving innocence and stuff, much like what Rorschach was doing with his journal. Even though 3 million people died in New York, it was bringing world peace. But to me, at first, I thought that was like this altruist, it made Holden Caulfield a good person and stuff. And now I look at it as I'm older and probably jaded and cynical, much like Holden and a lot of this generation that's talking this stuff. To me, I'm like, that's pretty self-righteous. I'm sort of like, you think you're some kind of savior or something, and you're not. There's smarter ways to stop the kids from falling off the cliff than to try to catch them yourself. You're isolated. You can ask for help. You can try to cut down the rye. It's your dream, and you can control it, much like life. But that's where we get into the deep thinking, and you can end up living in your own head. I'm one of those person that thinks everybody should be a free thinker, but there's, like I said, trappings to it where you can get into your head too far and you can't stay in the world around you because you build up an askew view of it in the real world. Pretty deep stuff, just considering we're supposed to be talking about Watchmen and books and things like that. Ideas are awesome. Let's go here before I get into 99 left balloons. Paulo Costa, what's up, guys? Hey, Ross Sanders, good to see you again. It has been a while. And Cayman X, going back to the comic connection, Rorschach takes from Mr. A and the question, Steve Ditko. Yes, absolutely. Steve Ditko is of that generation of Salinger where people were able to think for the first time. And that's how we got the 60s. That's how we got the Lord of the Rings got people thinking and stuff. People were actually delving into books and becoming these thinkers for the first time. I mean, there's a whole history lesson we can go into. Right. So whether you like Catcher in the Rye or not, it is a significant book. And I think it's kind of strange that with my generation, which I think is Generation X, Watchmen, a graphic novel that changed everything, good and bad, has turned around and could be our Catcher in the Rye for a generation of people. You can't take away the historical value. You can't take away, you have to acknowledge it. That's what I'm getting at. It has to be acknowledged. Now, Alan Moore set out to read the Watchmen, where he thought that this was going to inspire creators to where we'd have a ton of books, change the direction of comics, and people would be putting out stories that would totally wipe out the Watchmen. And the exact opposite happened. To me, it was like Eddie Van Halen coming on the scene. And a lot of these musicians didn't get the fact that instead of being innovative, they just try to cram in as many notes as they can in 10 seconds, as fast as they can. It kind of studied it. And it took away, and then as time went by, people were thinking, and it took away a lot of innocence from comics. People felt it made heroes have lead feet, took away a lot of the mysticism and the things that made these things our modern mythology. And Alan Moore ended up apologizing for that with ABC Comics, America's Best Comics, where we got Tom Strong, Promethea, Tomorrow's Stories, Top 10, and things like that. He acknowledged it. And a couple of people tried to find some books that were going to wipe out Watchmen. I remember when Jay Straczynski's Rising Stars came out, and Wizard did a big ad saying, could this be the new Watchmen and stuff? And I laughed. Scott Neely is here. All right, guys. The punk rock, then giving rock a kick in the arse. Yeah, exactly. I saw an interview with Bon Scott of AC/DC where he said the exact same words of what punk rock actually did. And it was give it a kick in the arse. I've been buying 1960s Superboy comics and adventure comics lately, at least once per week. Scott Neely, yeah, that stuff's great. I love my Superman is from the 60s where we got the Krypton stories and the Crystal Forest and the Beast of Krypton. I love that stuff. Scott Neely, don't know much about the topic. Well, that's cool, right? So I talked about a pop song called 99 Luft Balloons. What in the world could this have to do with Watchmen and what we're talking about? Watchmen came out in an era of towards the end of the Cold War, even though we didn't know it was the end of it. Even if you didn't know what the Cold War was, you were surrounded by it. I grew up in a generation of kids where the book 1984 was around, and you kind of caught a few things as you were growing up. You saw spy movies, spy television shows, James Bond and things like that. JFK had been assassinated with all the theories that was going on. Nixon, even though he opened up China and did a lot of great things in his presidency, he's remembered for Watergate, being a crook and things like that, right? And so there's a distrust of the government. Vietnam War had happened and really took the wind out of America. I grew up in the wasteland of all those vets and stuff and being strung out and things like that. I met very few people who were, had their shit together and stuff, right? And then you go on back, but it was the big threat of nuclear war. I think on YouTube you can find the television movie they made of nuclear war happening. I think it was like in 1983 called The Day After Tomorrow or something like that. I might have the title wrong, but it's here. It's there. And we grew up in that world where nuclear annihilation was real. I stressed out as a kid. I remember thinking if we can just get past 1984, I'll let it go. And I mean, little kids and stuff were actually worried about this because that felt like a reality. Bay of Pigs invasion with Cuba. We grew up in the era of the Cold War, and Watchmen came from that era. That's what it's about. It was the threat of annihilation, nuclear annihilation. It was Dr. Manhattan that kept that from happening just with his presence, So when you read Watchmen, you got to think of that era of the 80s. And I have seen people like Patton Oswalt and a few other people and stuff trying to say that we are nostalgic for an era that never existed, which is bullshit. We were all there. I don't know where they're coming with this stuff. What we got here? Yeah, Scott Neely. I've got people backing me up here. Scott Neely was born in 1970, so I remember all that. We had Ross Sanders is bringing up Martin Luther, Sanders, excuse me, and threads from the UK. Ever watched the DC animated movies? It's weird watching a modern movie about the death of Superman that I read 25 years ago in the 90s. Yep. I've been watching the stream hiding under my desk. Yeah, Eric Beam's there. So this was real. So when Watchmen came out, it was of that era, and it was topics that didn't have to be explained because that was the world. Now, I've suggested to people to go out and read like a whole bunch of comics from the early 80s that came out before Watchmen to see the significance of it and everything like that. And you get up there. So this world, we're so enmeshed with this world. This has been going on for so long with the idea of a nuclear annihilation and things like that, that the song came out. And I remember it was one of the first times I remember seeing controversy over a song to a certain extent. I wanted to know what this was. And strangely enough, it was PBS. We didn't have MTV yet, but the song was everywhere. 99 Luft Balloons. The American version was 99 Red Balloons, and they had two recordings of it, one in German, one in American. And apparently the Germans were upset about how watered down the American version was. And this song is all about two little kids having some money. They go to a toy store or something and they buy some balloons, blow them up. I guess they had helium somehow. They set 99 balloons up, and where there was the Berlin Wall, the government picks these balloons up on radar, and all of a sudden jet fighters are flying everywhere, and we're at the brink of nuclear annihilation. From what I understand in my little spot here in Virginia in America, this is like, it's come off like this is like a serious anthem in a pop song for Germany at the time and stuff, right? People loved it. This was their world, how innocent things. We were that, innocent little kids playing with balloons, and the world does get annihilated. And all they find in this world that's been totaled, looking for souvenirs of the past and stuff like that, they find some balloons and they let one go, and they think of a person that's died. Pretty, I've read the American version because I go into Captain Kirk and everything like that. And I've read the German lyrics years ago when we got the big internet going, because I always wondered what it was about. It's a pretty powerful song. And that was the 80s. Even our innocent little pop songs acknowledge just living your innocent little life, and little kids could cause a great big, huge controversy. David Bowie wrote the Berlin records, when he was out there. And my favorite David Bowie song, probably one of my favorite songs of all time, is about two lovers at the Berlin Wall. Berlin Wall came down in 1989, so we have a whole generation of people who don't remember this. That's just time. That's how it goes. So that's what I'm getting at. To read The Watchmen, the whole idea of a nuclear annihilation, the whole fear, the whole thing that pushes The Watchmen was a reality in the real world. Watchmen isn't a superhero story, guys. It's a science fiction story. Much like I talked about at the beginning of this video, where we're looking at things in a fictional environment of sci-fi, what we can acknowledge and talk about. So you have to get the mindset. Maybe you had to have been there. Maybe that hurts the book and the interpretations as if you weren't in the era of the Cold War. Okay. I'm going to look at some comments and move on here. What we got here? By the mid-'80s, we could sense a switch in sensing doom from the Cold War to sensing doom from corporate power. That's what Blade Runner was. Blade Runner was that. It was John Byrne, Marv Wolfman. When John Byrne came and revamped Superman, they made Lex Luthor, the big executive, CEO, executive yuppie, or whatever you want to call it, stuff like that. It was actually Marv Wolfman's idea. You are absolutely right. There was a shift there of corporations versus nuclear annihilation. Excuse me, guys. Scott Neely. Yep, I wish we could go back to the 80s. Even the 90s would be better than now. So many fights over super stupid stuff these days. Why can't people get along like we did back then? Well, that's what we're doing right now. We're having a discussion. Nobody's getting attacked. They brought up a topic. I'm talking about it. We're all grown-ups here. Not a big deal. I'm not here to really convince people to like Watchmen, but I will say I am dismissing the people who have such a hate of that era. I can't get in their head and understand it. But to me, the line is drawn when you get upset in a conversation when somebody brings up the historical merits of Watchmen. It blows my mind how they just want to shut it down. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It's just this hate that they have is just irrational to me. I enjoy dissident opinions on art that is universally praised or venerated. Oh, it's Red Vitamin Blue. Oh, I love his comments, man. Or praised or venerated as untouchable. Even if I don't agree with the points made, it's what makes culture healthy. Exactly. I wish I'd read that comment before I said what I just said, because that's what I'm getting at. I've had the things where people said they didn't. I'm one of the people. Here's my viewpoint of it, right? There's a time where it seems to be edgy and cool to go after things that are praised. And there's two kinds of people that do that. People, I'm going to use Star Wars. For a while there, people would be like, I've never seen Star Wars. And there's two kinds of people that say that. Liars and liars, so you can tell when it's disingenuous. You can tell when they're parroting what they've just heard, where they're trying to be cool, accepted, whatever. It's not from their thoughts. That's what kills me, is people who just listen to other people without tasting it, and that'll get me into the TV show in a minute. Alan Moore couldn't avoid commenting on the Cold War because he became an adult during the 70s. Yeah. Alan Moore grew up 60s and the 70s and things like that. And that's what I'm getting at. That's wholly what I'm talking about. I don't know if you were here at the beginning, Paulo, but I talked about 3 ways to read a piece of work. The work itself, which to me, Watchmen holds up, what was going on with the author and what was going on in the world at that time, the history that's going around when that author was writing the book. And you can mix and match all of those, or take some out and stuff. So yeah, I touched on that. I think the fear of Russia nuking us kept us a united nation. Well, Scott Neely, that is a psychological trick of controlling the masses, a mass of people, a mob of people, if you will. You give them a common enemy. And that's a whole other conversation there. Kid Ragnarok, I remember doing bomb drills in kindergarten in the mid 80s. Wow. Hold on. The comments just took off on me here. I think it just uploaded. Kid Ragnarok, I remember doing bomb drills in kindergarten in the mid 80s. Crazy looking back on it. I remember watching the film of Duck and Cover, If There's a Nuclear War. And that had to have been 1978. And that's the only time I ever saw that film. I couldn't believe they were showing it. And, would have been doing some drills, but they were talking like hurricane drills and stuff. And they were exactly the same. So, yeah, up until the late 70s, I don't remember ever doing another one. And I'm really hoping I am remembering that was kindergarten, not like a preschool or something, right? I completely forgot about that. But we had a lot of drills now. What do kids do now? Where I worked in schools for 5 or 6 years there, it's, shooting, school shooting drills and stuff, right? So, okay, Scott Neely, oh, wow, your elections went bad in Virginia this week. Here in North Carolina, we did well in the election. Scott Neely, well, it is what it is. I'm not going to get political here, but what little I have seen, like I said, I've stayed offline and tried to just kind of keep up with real facts and stuff. The way the elections went in Virginia, if you look at the charts of Virginia, of what was red and what was blue, it's a perfect example of why we have to keep the Electoral College in the United States. That's all I'm going to say. I love the American version of the song, but damn, the German version is deeper. Kid Ragnarok. Yes, and that's what I'm getting at. Yeah, exactly what I'm getting at. It just kind of shows what the world was at the time and how some people wanted to look at it, stuff. Yesterday, you gotta understand, Germany was right there at the Berlin Wall. That's why they were able to get some more intense. And then when you get it to America and they do English versions, they watered it down because we weren't at the wall. We were not on the front line. It would scare people. Yesterday marked the 30th year of the fall of said wall. I missed this by a day. At the beginning of the stream, I wanted to talk about this. I said I want to talk about this yesterday, but I took a sleeping pill and it messed me up all day the next day. Are you talking about the Watchmen Booker show? Both here in a minute. I've only seen the videos. I'm going to be talking about the show here in a minute. I'm going through the comments and then we'll get on with it. Oh, yeah, the movie. I'll touch on the movie. Superman being Reagan's bitch and Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Um, yeah, truth, justice, and the American way, and Superman doing what he thought was right. And you're having Batman, who is an anarchist. Frank Miller said it himself. Batman is an anarchist in Reagan's America. And when the nuclear bomb went off in that issue and messed up Superman, when the EMP signal went out and everybody lost electricity in America or whatever it was Batman who rose riding a horse like Zorro, going back to his roots and his sons of Batman, that kept order in Gotham. Is it fascism? I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. This was the world we were in. You could look at things. Was it a necessary movement? You know, Batman was a fascist in that. No matter how you want to look at it, he calls him an anarchist, but you know, he's convinced he's right and everybody else is stupid. You can go back and forth on that. That's why it's such a good piece of work. If you read it straight through, it's a great story. If you want to take it apart, there might be some disturbing things there you don't want to look at. Thus, 99 red balloons, 99 left balloons. Yeah. My son dated a girl that never saw Star Wars. She grew up in the Middle East. Okay. Scott Neely, you know, you're bringing up the fact that, you know, geographically she is in a place where she probably did not see Star Wars. So I'm talking, you know, I'm kind of talking about, you know, places that you can go down to the store and find it on DVD, VHS, places where we had television stations who played it constantly, like TBS there for a while and stuff like that. So yeah, I totally get that. She's forgiven. She's forgiven. Eric Bean, irrational hatred is a product of being taught that yours is the only opinion that matters. I'm not going to disagree with that at all. Context. Yes, Ross Sanders, we get context. Great feedback, guys, right? So we get to the Watchmen television show. And there's spoilers from here on out, right? I have held off. I had planned. See, Ross Sanders, World War III over the tiniest shit now. Yeah, could be. And it's always been like that. That was a big fear. I remember hearing a rumor that somebody saw a flock of, I don't know what, birds, ducks, birds, whatever, flying one time. And it looked like a bunch of jet fighters, and they were getting ready to attack another country over it. And then somebody was like, how could they be flying at like 30 miles per hour? You know, things like that, you know. Scott Neely, laugh out loud. I told him that he had to show her Star Wars. He was not allowed to date her if she didn't like it. That's hilarious. So we get to the Watchmen television show, guys. Now, I originally had a plan. I've been pumped for this. I am biased when it comes to Watchmen. I will give it a chance. But my bias does not keep me from being honest about it to other people. If it sucks, it sucks. I can read things there where I've read the book so much that I see they're doing the Watchmen television show. And there's one thing I don't like, and I'll talk about that, but I didn't do a review every week. It was going to be one of the first, probably the first show where I was going to do a review, you know, the next day or maybe that night after the show with my thoughts. And then I realized I couldn't do it because, much like the Watchmen, the guy running the show, Danny Landoff or something, I think he's wrote one, whoever, you know, the idea is that this is going to be just like the book, one complete story, even though it's in chapters. And we have to be introduced to the world. We have to see what's going on, get reference to the book, because Watchmen, the HBO show, is a sequel to the Watchmen book, okay? Not the movie. The squid happened. And we get clues. He's putting it out through with clues, and he's also reinterpreting things from the book and throwing them in the show. Okay, and each show is brilliantly written. That's why I'm in there. I got very worried that this thing was going to be this, I don't even know what the word is, identity, politics, politically charged, whatever. I thought we were going to go in that way when they started bringing up racism, but they used a real moment in history and during the 1921 or where it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Then we got introduced to this world. Then they started giving us clues. This is in the Watchmen world, you know, Dr. Manhattan. All of a sudden we see the squids raining down, enough to kind of hook us. And Watchmen is all about mystery and conspiracy. And I woke up real quick that, okay, this may not be politically preaching so far, but I could be wrong. I think it's going to have to be watched in its entirety. Much like reading the Watchmen, you need to read it in its entirety and go back and forth in the book and pick up things that they did or reference or repeated, things like that. And so I was like, okay, give this a chance, because the first thing that they did was make the people who read, the 7th Cavalry are white supremacists. They've replaced the KKK, I guess, in this world. And I don't understand how that happened. They obviously read the Watchmen book, and how they can make that leap with Rorschach's work and journals into that blows my mind. So I'm not believing what I'm seeing. And what's the first thing they do in the first episode? We get introduced to the world where the police wear masks to protect themselves, because the 7th Cavalry on one night all went after the policemen's families in their homes and stuff, so they hide their identity. Then they turn around and show us who the 7th Cavalry is. They show us this world, and they show us how we have superheroes who they have like a rank, I guess. I don't quite understand how you work your way in the police force, unless it's like being a detective or something, to where we have Sister Night, Red Scare, and Looking Glass. And they're interesting characters. I absolutely hate the Red Scare. But going back into Watchmen history, we had a unified world there for a while after the Cold War. So what's he doing there? They have enough questions there where you can tell that there's a bit of a story with all these characters. That's good characterization. But after reading the Watchmen, I gave it a chance, because I'm like, okay, something else is going on here. There's no way they're going to take the central character, the character that people loved from the Watchmen and stuff, and have him, make the new clan off of his image and stuff. So I'm sort of like, this is a trick. We're not seeing what we think we're seeing. And then we see where Sister Night and Red Scare and Looking Glass all work. And they brand people terrorists so they can do things to them. And Sister Night takes a guy into a room and beats him so severely that his piss and blood are running out from under the door so they can get information. And I'm like, these aren't heroes. And that's where people started saying that this was one of those woke shows and stuff. Time will tell if it is, in my opinion, when we get the whole story. But I'm watching this like, are people watching the same show? They're showing us these are not the good guys. You know what I mean? That's why I'm like, people who are praising it and think it's their political view and it's a left show and stuff like that, I'm like, we're seeing brutality. We're seeing human rights taken away. We're seeing vigilantism done legally, if that's possible. I'm saying no human rights. It's an oxymoron. It shouldn't be existing. Second show comes in, and now we're starting to tap into Watchmen being redone. As I'm watching the show with the fiance, I'm sitting here like, there's going to be a closet. The first issue, Rorschach is investigating a murder, and he finds the secret closet with the secret back in it, and he finds a comedian uniform, and we find that the cop who was killed in episode 1 was in the Klan because he has his Klan outfit. Now, wait a minute. The 7th Cavalry is supposed to be these guys. You know what I mean? So when the chief of police was killed, that's our murder. That's why we're touching on the beats of Watchmen, things happening again. And the third episode is where I think people really should stick in, watch the first 3 episodes and stick in to decide if you want the show, because that's when it becomes Watchmen. We come in with Jean Smart playing Lori Blake, who's taking the comedian's name. She's saying there was a case one time where there was a secret closet, and I figured, hey, I'll look in that closet. And there's an assassination attempt at a funeral of the chief of police, Don Johnson, who was murdered. And I wasn't sure if we were seeing what we were seeing, because if you go back to Ozymandias in The Watchmen, if you're following me, if you've read the book, there was a fake assassination attempt. They just didn't expect Lori to have a gun, you know what I mean, to shoot the guy. So we're back we're learning things about the Watchmen characters. We're going forward. They're not revamping anything. They're not doing anything. They introduce the world and how screwed up it is. The internet is illegal. Cell phones are illegal. Why they have a booth that you can call Mars on, like a phone booth, blows my mind. That's the one where I'm just sort of like, okay, that's a little heavy-handed. And then there's clues. There's a conspiracy going on. We have a guy, Keene, running for president. He's telling Lori that he can get her owl out of the cage, making us think Night Owl is in prison. He's manipulating her to go to Tulsa and, do this case. Yet we have people who may or may not be with the 7th Cavalry being led by a guy, a black guy, a 105-year-old black guy in a wheelchair, hanging a cop. And they're all running around with Night Owl's technology flying around in owl ships. Now, it's right there in front of you. I could be wrong, but it's right there in front of you that there's a conspiracy, and Night Owl seems to be maybe leading them. I mean, there's a conspiracy here. It's moving on. There's things going on. And wouldn't it just make perfect sense that after Night Owl saw Rorschach blown up, that he would want to redeem his friend? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. There's enough here that there's some meat to it. This isn't preaching. It shows us the world. It's set in the real world like Watchmen was, and they pulled real historical reference. Now, by the time we get to episode 10, if it's heavy-handed, I'll totally call it out. Okay, Scott Neely, laugh out loud. I told him what he anti-heroes or villains then. Yeah, could be Ross Sanders. Comic Core, sorry late to the show, but Watchmen is really good. I think it's a great show so far, but episode 3 is the one after we get past all the exposition, after we set up the plot, that's where it becomes a Watchmen show, I think. Tonight's episode 4. I hope it's just as good as last week's, because last week's was perfection. There are 3 episodes. Maybe I should start watching it. I have been watching Titans. I can pick out the crap in it, but still love it. I don't watch the CW now, but plan to watch the Crisis crossover. I'm watching the Crisis crossover, and the only DCU show that I'm really pushing on people is the Doom Patrol. I think that's fantastic. That's the one that they just nailed it. Did you ever read Before Watchmen? Yeah, I have all the issues. I actually have a couple of the series signed by the artists and writers. The Silk Spectre book was the one that was far and above the best out of all that. I think Jay Lee signed some of the Ozymandias for us and stuff. Yeah, I read Before Watchmen. Oh, some of the stuff was really good. Like the Silk Spectre book to me is the one that stands out, but I don't consider it canon. To me, these are just stories over here. I can take them or leave them. But it was really good to have a few books that didn't suck. How's that sound? Silk Spectre book, I wanted it to go on. I wished it was an ongoing. That was a really good story. The Ozymandias book, it was kind of cool to flesh out a few things with them, but I really didn't see anything that blew me away. Red, Vitamin Blue, there are no wrong tactics, only wrong targets. The axiom is what makes the seemingly villainous actions of these Watchmen heroic and justified. Yeah, okay. I get what you're saying. You have the people in power in their masks and things like that, and the law on their side, taking somebody who drives around in a pickup truck, lives in a trailer. Yeah, they're going after the weak. Again, I could talk about this. I'm holding back. Scott Neely, I love Doom Patrol too, but it's not running right now. Go to Walmart. I got the DVD. It's one of the, I buy everything secondhand or I'll wait. You know what I mean? For it to go down, end up in a bin. Doom Patrol is one of the few things that I bought brand new. $20, DVD set, done. Oh, I had to have it. It's at Walmart. Was never really interested, but I may actually check the Watchmen show out. Is that the second person to say that? Like I said, the 3rd episode is the one that I think if the rest of the show is like the 3rd episode, we're good. The first 2 are heavy-handed, a lot of information, exposition, showing you the world I'm in. Here are the characters. It doesn't really start until episode 3, in my opinion. And Jean Smart as Lori is nailed it. I've never really had an opinion on her. I've heard people that praise her acting skills and stuff like that, but in this, she nailed it. She is awesome in this. The Watchmen TV show cannot possibly comment on current affairs. If you consider the creation of Dr. Manhattan, the term the alternate history can follow the same path. That's what's good about it. They acknowledge a few things. Which to me is all you have to do. Just have a character acknowledge a few things, right? Sister Knight was born in Vietnam, came over to the States. In the Watchmen world, Vietnam became a state of the a state with the United States. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. You're absolutely right. They can't comment on current affairs, but they can take a few. They can talk about some. I'm being very gingerly here, man. They can talk about some stressful things that have been going on around here and acknowledge them in the show and kind of go with it. That's why I don't think it's a super far left show so far. Okay, they're just showing us what it's like out there now. Yeah, I have the Blu-ray. The world of Watchmen, the USSR might have not fallen. There was no Iranian revolution. Brazil could still be a military dictatorship, and there was no challenge disaster. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Okay, I follow you now. Yeah, I got you. Paulo was talking about the historical events that have happened that shaped a lot of our governments, if you will, and how we work together and stuff. But in the real world, we didn't have a squid, a big gigantic psychic squid fall on New York. So I'm kind of thinking that might, if we really wanted to play devil's advocate here, that might replace a whole lot of this stuff that you're bringing up. The world actually unified there for a little bit, what happened after that. So it's definitely a turn there. Oh, I think the DVD of Cobra Kai is coming out this week, season 1 and 2, but no sign of a Blu-ray. Cobra Kai is fantastic. I think the first season is perfect. The second season, I was like, some of this is just too contrived. The more time goes on, the more history changes, making commenting on current affairs ridiculously off point for the story. Yeah, I get what you're saying, Paula. Okay, Ross Sanders, or a blue god with his cock out. Okay. Let's go ahead and get it. One of the things that I went after Josh Terry that I was talking about, commented on something I put on Facebook about the bad press, and he thinks it's a good show. He hates that it's getting so much bad publicity or whatever it is and stuff. I kind of wanted to look into that. And I quit real quick because the first thing anybody wanted to talk about was towards the end of Watchmen, she pulled out this great big huge blueberry colored dildo. Okay, let's just get it out of the way. And a picture of Esquire magazine with her covering up, looks like it's in the 70s, Dr. Manhattan and stuff, right? So at the beginning of the show, we have her missing Night Owl because she has a pet owl that she's feeding. And the senator talked her into going to Oklahoma by saying, when I'm president, I can pardon, that little owl of yours that's in a cage. So she's had two loves in her life and stuff, right? So one to me is sort of like, I don't know, maybe it's like her first love, her first anything. She was like 16 when she went out with Dr. Manhattan and was with him for years. And then she's got the emotional connection that she couldn't get with Dr. Manhattan. One's a first love, and then one was a true love, in my opinion, because Dan could be emotional with her. She'd get that, a human being. Dr. Manhattan was drifting further and further away from humanity. And the reason that Silk Spectre was around was to be that anchor to humanity with him. That's what I mean. This is deep stuff where you have to read the book to get what's going on in the screen. That's why I think it's a great show, is that the more you know about Watchmen, the actual work, the more you can get out of the show and see how they're hitting a few great things in there. I was trying to do a continuous comment, but it's impossible with this format. Yeah, I got you, Paulo. I really do. I get you, Paulo, and I would love to have the conversation. So my big thing is that when it comes to people going back to the beginning, we might just kind of wrap this up a little bit. The biggest thing that kind of gets me about not liking the Watchmen is, A, maybe you never read it and you're parroting what people say. 2, you don't understand what you're reading because it is sophisticated reading. It takes multiple reads and you're just not into that, or you've never tried that, or nobody told you, or you don't have the attention span, Or 3, you really read it and just did not like it, which is fine. Like I said, we're all grown-ups here. If you don't like something, that's fine. But don't be the phony. Don't be the fake, and be a free thinker. Don't think that just because you don't like Watchmen or Star Wars or these great highlights, in my opinion, just to be edgy and cool and show off for your friends, or think that you've had some epiphany in this world and everybody else are idiots because they can't see it. Don't be self-righteous about it. The catcher in the rye can go either way there. And that's the big thing. The phoniness out there of people not liking things is always going to be a part of us. That's out there, but it seems to really be turned up on the internet because that's a way of getting attention or validating yourself or trying to show other people that you were ahead of the game. You know what I mean? Like you're smarter than everyone else. And that smugness I have ran across, which is probably why I'm coming off a little heavy-handed saying that. But I've had a conversation or two with people who I could tell they obviously dipped their toe into the work and didn't give it a real chance. It's just something that's just out there, like it's heavy-handed. Alan Moore wanted Watchmen to be blown away by other people's works, and that's where he made the comment years later that he just didn't see the talent out there of anybody that's really interested in him. Watchmen let Alan Moore down is how it came out for not inspiring people the way he thought that they would be, elevating comics, and I think he may be right. Take it at face value and shallow. Yeah. I think it's the dark tone. Like I enjoyed Arion Volume 1, but the Arion, the Eternal, was not interesting to me as a kid. Tone. Yeah, absolutely. Is it too dark for you? Yeah, I totally get that. We go back to 99 Luft Balloons versus 99 Red Balloons. The American version with the English lyrics is, watered down way more than the actual German, absolutely. Ross Sanders, or play the Watchmen video game if you're a gamer, Tim. Oh, I mean, you know what? I remember when the Ultimate Cut came out. I think it had a video on there or something of it. I might look on YouTube and see if there's a walkthrough on it. Let's see what we got there. Okay, guys. Well, at 51 minutes, I may end up making a shorter version of this video where I just kind of sit down and talk to the camera like an old school, because when I do that, and I don't watch comments and stuff, sometimes I get into I kind of get into a stream of thought there that I get lost in, and I have to go back and watch the video and see what I said. So I might try that with this idea. I don't script anything. Paulo Costa, people understanding things on different levels. Not everyone has the intellectual development to fully comprehend Moore's message, and some get stuck on the superficial elements like Rob Liefeld. Totally, it's what. Yeah, I understand that, Paulo. My thing is though, if it's not your taste, that's cool. If you like, not a big deal. And that's what I'm saying. We're being an adult here. But if you're going to approach me in a way and want to talk about Watchmen and stuff, don't bring a pillow to a gunfight. I'm not going to belittle anybody, because how many people can you actually say has actually read this book for 30 years? I totally get that. And if I'm coming off like an ass, that's all right. But it gets real frustrating when people just have the hate for it and they can't tell you why, if we want to talk about the topic. It's really not a big deal. We're doing a video here. We're talking about it. And I feel like I'm coming off a little heavy-handed, and maybe I am, but still it's just a work. And I got to think, I know people who didn't like Watchmen in the late 80s and early 90s. They just didn't like it. Rorschach turned them off. The violence turned them off. The subject matter. Somebody said about the dark tone and stuff, and I completely forgot about that until they said it. So yeah, saying, or you're doing to be edgy and stuff, I think that should be dismissed. I really do. Gorvid Al's here. Awesome. Good day, Tim. Watchmen and Sandman are challenging for new readers who haven't grown up reading much of anything. They are interested, but give up after a sampling of the books. Yeah. And I think what's going on is I'm getting into the mindset of people I have actually talked to. And I'm not talking about people who don't do a lot of reading. I don't talk about, I think I'm putting them under the umbrella unintentionally while I'm talking about this. And this isn't damage control. I'm really focused on some of the conversations I've had with people in the one or two videos I've seen. So I'm kind of charged up. There are things, I can name many, many, many things that I've read that I just did not get at all. Why this is this? Why is that? I'm one of those people I struggled with Cyrano de Bergerac because I couldn't grasp the concept of what his white feather plume meant. It was supposed to be a symbol, and I ended up failing on a test in not failing, but I got the question wrong on a test in 6th or 7th grade or something, and it ate me up. So yeah, I totally get that. Or Dune. See, there we go. Now, Dune is considered one of the greatest sci-fi stories of all time. This is perfect. I've read the first book of Dune. I never heard or saw anything of Dune. I own the movie that David Lynch did in the 80s. It had Sting in it and stuff, right? But I'm completely mesmerized and lost on how this has such a huge following and it's lasted so long and how people praise it and stuff. I mean, I'm missing the significance of it. So right there we are. Now, I don't put down, this is what I'm talking about. I've given Dune the first book a chance. I've read another book of Dune about halfway through. It's not grabbing me. I'm not seeing what other people are seeing. And I don't think that's a big deal. I don't go out and tell people that Dune is awful or they're wrong or something like that. The thing has merit. It's way up there. It's one of those works that's influenced people and had people talk about it and they dissect it and they look into it and stuff. I never got it. Do I hate Dune? No. Do I want Dune to disappear? No. Do I tell people they're idiots for liking it? That's the big thing that's killing me. I don't come off like I've had an epiphany that that Dune is just, you've been suckered. You've been suckered. That's what I'm getting at. And like I said, if you don't like Watchmen, you don't like it. That's cool. It's the reasoning for some people that I just have a problem with. Or metal or progressive rock music or the Joker movie or anime. Now, the Joker movie, I love the Joker movie. But I will sit here and tell you that I thought that the Joker movie was very close to being a poor man's Taxi Driver almost, right? It's the era that it's set in, some of the framing that I saw, some of the themes, but it became its own thing. It got it together and it pulled away from all that. Now, this thing is getting close to making $1 billion. As much as I love the movie, as much as I know I'm going to own the movie, I'm not understanding why this thing is so big that it's making $1 billion. Okay, I mean, that's what I'm trying to get at. My biases, I feel like I can handle my biases sometimes, right? Why this movie is about to make $1 billion, I am out of the loop. I don't know why. Or the King of Comedy. Now, the King of Comedy, as soon as I saw Robert De Niro and I saw that Tonight Show thing going on there, and that's exactly where my mind went. I'm like, De Niro has turned into Jerry Lewis. Having De Niro in there to me is them acknowledging King of Comedy and Taxi Driver, in my opinion. This is like, well, if we're going to do this, let's go ahead and just get De Niro in there. Like I said, just acknowledging things like that seems to really take a lot of the bad taste out of it in my mind. All right. Okay, guys, you guys have any other, we're getting ready to hit close to an hour here. I've got a few things to do. Anybody got any questions or comments or anything you want me to talk about? Because as soon as I say goodbye, every time I get ready to hit that end stream button and my comments will take off. Well, there's a lot of people here that I'm glad popped up. A lot of people I haven't heard from in a while. And thanks, guys, for coming in. Like I said, sub, hit that bell down there. I feel like a real YouTuber because I've actually had a few people message me to tell me they're not getting their alerts, and 1 or 2 people claim that they were unsubscribed to me. I think I'm just getting caught in crossfire from other parts of YouTube. Oh, Trauma movies. Awesome. All right, guys. Oh, here we go. All right. You guys have a good day and be excellent to one another. Later.